those of us who study at the Ziegler School of Publishing have already received a note about our guests today. But for everyone else, I would like to Mr. Ghassan Wilder, Ms. Fatin Farhat, to the Ziegler School of Publishing, and also as part of this program for History for Peace. A little bit about Mr. Zaqtan. He's a Palestinian poet, novelist, editor, as well as a playwright. It's gone. No. Okay. His book of poems, which is called Like a Straw Bird, It Follows Me, was awarded the Griffin Poetry Prize in 2013. He's been twice nominated for the Neustadt International Prize for Literature, which is perceived as the American Nobel Prize. Zaqtan was awarded the National Medal of Honor by the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in 2013 in recognition of his achievement and contribution to Arabic and Palestinian literature. He has been awarded the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation 2014 Fellowship for Creative Arts in the field of poetry. No, this is... Sorry. Sorry, I've moved on to Samuel Wilder's bio.
Did I wonder?
It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Yeah, it's not my fault. This is an editorial test. Okay, sorry. Yes, but when I say that his works have been translated into English, French, Italian, Norwegian, German, and other languages, I believe I mean Ghassan. Okay. Samuel Wilder is a translator of Arabic literature. He's a writer and a student of comparative poetics. Since 2006, he has lived and worked as a literary translator in Cairo and Beirut, but pursued academic work in London and Cambridge. But you're based in Berlin.
Yes.
Right now. That's right.
All
Great.
of that happened since 2006.
While a student at Brown University in 2005, he was awarded the Lucius Leon Prize for Poetry Translation. Am I right? Right. For the translation of two of Horace's odes. His recent translations include Ghassan Zaqtan's Describing the Past, which we published a few years back, and the freshly minted Where the Bird Disappeared, also a novel by Ghassan Zaqtan. Fatin Farhat is a PhD student at the Cultural Policy Program at the University of Hildesheim in Germany. She's a freelance researcher, advisor to UNESCO Paris, to the EU and several other local and international organizations. She is here primarily to interpret Ghassan's answers and questions and comments, which will be in Arabic. So she very kindly agreed to do this. Thank you very much for being here.
She's also doing a dance at the end, she said?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
with my daughter and Ghassan. I've been practicing.
We'll begin with asking Ghassan a few questions. We'll talk to Sam as well. Sam has specific things about translation to talk about, so we'll go into all that. And so, unlike some of the other sessions that we've had at the Ziegler School, we would like to keep the discussion among us for some time, and then we will open up the floor for questions. Ghassan, you have used poetry, you've been writing poetry for a long time, and you have used it as a tool of social and political activism. Can you tell us how you came to choose this form of writing for this kind of work?
أنت استخدمت الشعر كأداة التغيير السياسي والاجتماعي. السؤال هو كيف أنت وصلت لهذه الطريقة أو هذه الأسلوب في الشعر في عملك؟
اولا يعني ما كانش هناك خطة لتحويل الشعر بالنسبة لي، يعني فقط أداة تغيير. في الواقع الفلسطيني المعقد، يعني واللي بالتأكيد هناك لدى معظمكم فكرة عنه، لا مجال للخلاص من السياسي. يعني محاولة تفادي الكتابة أو التعامل مع الواقع السياسي هو رفاهية أظن أننا لا نملكها.
So actually, my efforts were not orchestrated to write about politics or society. It wasn't a plan. However, in the Palestinian very complex political context, it is not easy to avoid politics or escape politics. Escaping politics seems like a luxury that Palestinians cannot afford. Most of you probably know about Palestine if you have any knowledge. So the political situation forces you to be political.
Yes, certainly. You have, but you've moved also from poetry to writing novels. Is that, I mean, how did that transformation come about? I'm guessing it was also very organic.
أنا يعني لدي فهم أو رؤية أظن أنها موجودة لدى الكثيرين. لا أضع خطوط حادة مثل حدود بين حقول العمل الإبداعي، بحيث أنه يتم تقسيمها. هذا حق للشعر لا يجوز تجاوزه، هذا حق للرواية لا يجوز تجاوزه، وهذا الكتاب المسرحي. أنا أظن أنه هاي الحقول أو هاي الحدود هي حدود افتراضية، خاصة عندما تتذكر أنك تتعامل بنفس المادة الخام، أنك تقوم بتشكيل المادة الخام نفسها التي تتفق فيها كل هذه الحقول اللي هي اللغة. بالنسبة لي أنا مبكرا بدأت بالسرد. صحيح أن كنت كاتب، أصدرت حوالي ربما 9 مجموعات أو 8 مجموعات قبل كتابي الأول، ولكن كتابي النثري الأول أو كتاب السرد الأول ظهر عام 1992. النصوص المسرحية اللي كتبتها بالثمانينات عمليا.
I think I share a vision that many of you, if you are involved in the literary world, share, is that I don't draw acute and very fixed boundaries between the different artistic disciplines. I think it's the wrong way to go about it, actually. So these boundaries that exist are actually virtual and they're not really real. Especially for me as a writer and a poet, because my raw material is language, and language is important for both for poetry and also for writing novels. It's interesting because he has published already 9 poetry volumes. Ghassan is known as a poet. However, his first novel, the small one, came out in 1992, which is a long time ago. So this shows how both were working in parallel. And many of his short stories and plays also came out in the 80s and the 90s.
ممكن أضيف هنا أنه التجول بين السرد والنثر يسمح بتبادل الخبرة. كانت تعبير دقيق، تبادل الخبرة بين الشعر والنثر. الشعر تمرين طويل على الكثافة وعلى الاختصار، تمرين طويل على الحذف أيضا والبياض إذا بدنا، وسيتصب كل هذه الخبرة الموجودة التي أنتجها الشعر ستنعكس بدون شك على السرد وانفتاح السرد انفتاحه على اللغة، على دلالاتها، على ظلالها. هذا الانفتاح سينعكس ايضا على التجربه الشعريه. انا في رايي انه هذا التجول اذا تم قياسه يعني وخلق انسجام بينه سيسمح بغناء التجربه.
So for me, I wander off between poetry and between writing poetry and writing novels. It's very important, this movement, because for me, poetry is an exercise, a really tough exercise on how to be precise and how to use precise language. Whereas the openness that I get from writing novels is also important and gives a lot of insight into my poetry reading. So this process of moving from one side to the other, wandering off, is useful for both experiences.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Speaking of language, yeah, your raw material is language, and you have also been translated into so many different languages. And I'm asking this question at this point because I would like to bring in Sam eventually into this discussion. Yeah, so including English, which is the language you're familiar with. How does it feel when you read something, some work of yours composed in a very different language, which perhaps comes from a very different kind of landscape, culturally and physically, transmitted into a different language? How's your experience been of that?
أنت تم ترجمتك لغات مختلفة، الإنجليزية قد تكون أقرب لغة عليك وتقدر تفهمها، بس كيف شعورك حول الترجمة بشكل عام؟ هي الترجمة إلى لغات في سياقات ثقافية وجغرافية مختلفة وبعيدة، كيف شعورك تجاه هذا؟
يعني هنا يعني لابد من الحديث عن مفهوم الترجمة لدي. ويمكن تحدثنا أنا وسام في بنغلور عن حول هذا الأمر، ممكن هنا نكرر قليلا. أنا في رأيي إنه الترجمة أو المترجم الطرف الآخر في العمل الإبداعي الذي المنوي نقله إلى لغة أخرى هو شريك كامل في النص. ولست أميل إلى فكرة الأمانة في عملية نقل النص من لغة إلى لغة، لأني أظن أن الأمانة المبالغ فيها بهذا الجانب ستؤدي إلى حبس النص في قفص واستعارة مخيلة بشكل كامل، مخيلة لغة ووضعها وعزلها عن الواقع الجديد التي ستذهب إليه. أنا مع التصرف الذي يبديه المترجم مع حريته في الإضافة طبعا في سياق المحافظة على مستوى النص.
To answer this question, I must address the concept of translation, what it means to me. This is an issue that Sam and Ghassan spoke about a lot also in Bangalore, so for those who were there, they will hear it again. For Ghassan, the translator is a full partner. He has, of the text. He has, as if to say, equal ownership of the text. And that's why he's very careful, and he's not a strong advocate of complete faithfulness in translation. He believes that the translator should be given the space to use his own imagination, to invite his own experience. Otherwise, the result will be an isolated text. It will not be a text that is true to both the writer and the translator. Freedom is important to the translator. Background experience is important also to the translator.
Excellent. I mean, different authors come up with very different ideas of translation, and this is really, really interesting to hear this. So, Sam, let's talk about the works of Ghassan that you have translated. What kind of freedom did you take? I mean, he's talking about freedom. Or what were the challenges that, and specific challenges to translating his work, and yeah, what kind of freedom did you take? I mean, are the narratives the same at all, or like he's just no? Sorry, I'm joking.
I actually never read them. No. No, I mean, I think some of the issues that come to mind that are maybe specific to our relationship to each other and what this text itself, these texts themselves have to do with translation is that they're unusual as texts, as prose texts. The style, the images, I mean, you could talk about them as you could categorize them in terms of trends in the history of literature and so on, but they very much have an effect even of unsettling a reader with their sequence of images, the way they work narratively and so on. But when you're bringing a text across at least what is perceived to be real barriers of, East and West, historical barriers, geographical barriers that are not the usual ones, I think you confront a special kind of, special types of problems, in a good sense, problems. For example, will your readers think that you're sort of presenting this bizarre, exotic object that you've retrieved in your, from far away because it's something that's so unfamiliar to them? Might that, and properly so, arouse criticism for saying, well, shouldn't you be, what is this? How can you present this out of context? What does this mean? And so on. But we should be asking those questions. In my opinion, translation itself is that kind of has the potential to unsettle assumptions, has the potential to unsettle readers, even politically and so on. I think it's a very important thing. And that the fact that I think the reason that if all of these issues come to the fore more in a text where there's such a perceived difference between the background of the writer and the translator, all the better. And the way that I've actually approached translating these books has been to be as literal as possible, to use a term that probably most translators don't like. But I actually, in my first drafts of the text, am extremely literal to the, even at the expense of proper English style. I then step completely away from the original, and I'm kind of just pulling back the curtain. This is, practically speaking, what it's like to translate these prose texts. You then forget about the original, and you view it aesthetically, and then in the end, you do drafts, and then you realize you made all kinds of mistakes, and you go back to the original, and you realize he said this already some other way, and I'll put it the way he put it. And then, in the end, you don't have answers to all of these questions about exoticism versus literalism versus this, but you have something that raises more questions, and that's really, and hopefully some people like it.
Yeah, we like it a lot. But I'm just opening up the discussion on translation. But is this, how much of it is true about translating from Arabic in general, translating to the English language in general?
You're in a situation with Arabic, well, although there are many translations from Arabic and Arabic prose, and there are even some famous, relatively speaking, famous translators of Arabic literature, you're talking about, in a way, such a limited enterprise, like so few very different approach, so little of even the diversity of the conversation about translation and what it means in terms of world literature or European literature has even reached the domain of people who work on, who translate Arabic literature. For the most part, I don't want to make it sound like, you're just stepping out into the wilderness and no one's ever done it before, but I think there's there's freedom in that, and then it can also be a little bit intimidating, which is that you don't really know if you're doing it right because you don't have a lot of models. And most of the fiction that I've seen that's translated from Arabic tends to be realist narrative fiction, because I think there's a little bit of the thought out there that, well, if someone's already taking the risk to read a book from Arabic, it better have a pretty good plot. Like there better be some payoff, or else why am I not reading Proust, or why am I not reading, so, and I mean, I think that these books show at least that some wonderful people in the world are willing to publish experimental Arabic fiction. Some people read it, some people respond to it, and I hope it's a growing thing. I mean, there are a few experiment, but
they're cheering. Cheering from the back.
Yeah, absolutely. We believe in all of this, and but you also wanted to talk about different approaches to translating even the same text, and I believe yesterday those of you who attended Nancy's class also talked about it, if I'm not mistaken, about taking same text and translating it in a different manner. Would you like to talk more about that?
Sure. Or at least to give a hint, and then I have text as a kind of party favor, if you like, that it's... I mean, this would take the conversation way maybe off the map of where we are now, but I just think that it's in the vein of thinking about opening up different ways of translation and the possibilities of translation and how it bridges difference. One of the types of translation that interests me a lot is translating text from different eras, different historical periods, and different poetic forms. And one, I printed out an example just to give you, because which is...
Should we have it out?
Yeah. I mean, and again, I don't want to distract from our actual conversation. I just thought this might be a nice contribution, which is it's a text of a poem in two different translations that I did. One being kind of a literal, and one being more of a poetic translation. But you can see that I don't really want. The idea wasn't that we would talk about that necessarily now, but I just think have a look and see what you think, and it's there. So yeah. There's two, so yeah, you'll get two different.
So there's one which is tightly printed.
Yeah, one which has numbering, which
Yeah.
is sort of like I guess you could say like the academic type version, and then the other is a poetry. But let's.
أنا بدي أضيف عن يعني العلاقة مع سام عمليا، إنه أنا لفتت نظري بقوة المناطق اللي بيشتغل عليها سام في اللغة العربية، بمعنى إنه هو يعني أجى من أقصى الكلاسيك، من أحد الكتب المهمة اللي هو كتاب الأغاني، اللي هو عمليا كتاب 1000 سنة يعني عمليا، وبيناقش نصوص وحكايات يمكن أمر القيس موجود فيها، ثم يعني من تلك المنطقة البعيدة الكلاسيكية التقليدية اللي هي عمليا يعني خلف حاجز الزمن إذا والتاريخ، يتعامل في نفس الوقت يوصل للغة الحداثية، اللغة المعاصرة اللي هي عمليا لغة مرمزة إذا صح التعبير. يمكن من هون يعني من هذا الاتساع البيكار أو اتساع المشهد لديه، أنا بالنسبة لي كان هذا ملفت ومميز.
For Ghassan, the relationship with Sam is particular because from the beginning, Ghassan has been intrigued by the territories that Sam is willing to explore in Arabic literature and in translation, the risks and the fields that he is not scared actually to explore. So Sam can work or already worked on texts that are ancient, really old, 1,000-year-old classical poetry, yet he can move and quickly and easily and work with contemporary and modern texts. And this ability of Sam to move from traditional classical to contemporary approaches and poetry is really important, and it gives him a kaleidoscope of exposure to Palestinian, to Arabic literature in general, and the ability to work with any text actually. And this is what Ghassan finds really interesting in Sam's work.
That sounds pretty good. Excellent. Yeah, so would you like to read from this thing, or it's something just, okay, you just wanted everybody to have a look at? Yeah. Well, that's great.
I'd love to talk, if anyone wanted to talk about it after or something,
Okay,
that I'd love
yeah,
to,
yeah,
but I don't.
yeah. But I mean, I think you've covered some of this, but I would still ask you that. I mean, you've spent time in the Arab world, and how did that help you maybe get into this whole, embark on this journey as a translator, and did it help actually being there? I mean, you could have perhaps studied Arabic in Cambridge and just perhaps just been there, but just immersing yourself in that day-to-day culture, was it helpful? Was it?
When I think back on that story of how I've got to this point, I think it goes in motions like zigzags. There's not at all a straight line where it swings back and forth. And even in terms of your own knowledge, what you feel comfortable about. Like the reason to begin with why I started learning the Arabic language had some strange intuition, no idea that it had something to do with poetry, it had something to do with language and how it worked, but it was like a romantic idea of something you would want to learn. And then if you go live someplace, it's about having enough money to pay your rent, it's about, where do you get coffee, it's about do you make friends with people, do you nice things. These things sort of recede, especially having to do with language, where you think, I don't even know enough, I can't even speak to someone the way that their 8-year-old child speaks to them. How could I possibly think about their poetry, But life, this is how, eventually you realize, well, these are the limits of my knowledge, but those aren't the limits of my curiosity, or those aren't the limits of my desire, and so you swing back and forth. When I lived first in Cairo, I realized how much I didn't know, and I would have thought it was a crazy dream to think that I would be sitting here doing this, But something about that process of going and going back, and what you don't know and what you do know just leads you where you end up.
Yeah, just a story, because we were talking about Morocco the other day. So obviously I went to Morocco without knowing any French or any Arabic, and so at immigration, I gave my passport, which had a visa, to the immigration officer, and he says something in Arabic, and I was like, sorry, no Arabic. And then he says something in French. I was like, sorry, no French either. So then he's like, he whatever, he stamps and just hands it back to me and says, you are screwed.
I know I'm the interpreter, but I have to intervene, because even for us,
always.
This is the complexity of the Arabic language, is that even for someone like me to go to Morocco, it is impossible for me to understand the local dialect, and I would have to speak in classical Arabic only if I wanted to communicate with people. So it's not only you, I face the same problem.
Okay, that's
good
to
know.
That's good to know. Yeah, okay, coming back to Ghassan, well, let's talk about a few themes and important motifs in your work. And there's a reason why I'm going to talk about this, because we have among us those, some teachers of history, because we are doing this in collaboration with this program called History for Peace. You see, one of your novels is called Describing the Past. It is about a certain kind of history. Memory and history and a sort of personal memory is very central to your work. Can you tell us more about this? Like how this informs, how this affects your work through all the years, how that has happened?
سؤال عن الثيمات المحددة اللي بتستخدمها أنت في عملك، فمثلا في عندك لو هو عم بيثير هذا الموضوع لأنه في بين الجمهور ناس متخصصة في التاريخ ومعايير التاريخ. فمثلا كتابك وسط الماضي بتحدث عن فترة تاريخية محددة عن ذاكرة شخصية، رواية عن فترة تاريخية عن طريق ذاكرة شخصية. فشو الثيمات اللي بتشتغل في الوضع؟
أنا في رأيي أحد المصادر الرئيسية لأعمالي سواء بالشعر أو بالسرد هي الذاكرة. ولكن الذاكرة ليست الذاكرة الساكنة، يعني ذاكرة يعاد تركيبها داخل النص، الحاضر يتصرف بها، من خلال الحاضر ممكن يتم تحريكها وتفكيكها وإعادة تركيبها من جديد. ليست ذاكرة مرسومة على جدار، يعني هي ذاكرة تنمو وتكتسب يعني حياتها من خلال الراهن.
So one of the main issues and themes that I work on is memory. And here when I speak of memory, I don't speak of a static memory, something that is very fixed. I speak about memory that can be regenerated, reconstructed, can be dismantled, and through the present. It grows, it has its own life. So it's a different kind of memory, but this is one of the main themes in my work.
الذاكرة هنا أيضا هي التاريخ الشخصي وتاريخ الآخرين المحيطين، يعني ليست ذاكرة محددة بشخص محدد، هي ذاكرة أيضا تكتسب قوتها، تكتسب غذائها، تكتسب حيويتها من الذاكرة الجمعية وذاكرة الآخرين الذين يحيطون بها. لا يوجد أي نص في تصوري خارج التاريخ، ولكن يعني زاوية الدخول ستختلف بين كاتب وآخر، بين شخص وآخر.
For me, memory is also a personal journey. It's an autobiography. It's an autobiography that also feeds in the collective memory around me. So I don't think that there is any text that is out of history. It's all connected to memory. The difference is in which angle you address memory and in which manner you address memory.
الجغرافيا في وصف الماضي هي أيضا يعني جزء فاعل في النص. إذا أردنا أن نعود إلى سؤالك، ليس فقط التاريخ، الجغرافيا، الموقع اللي هو مخيم للاجئين الفلسطينيين شرق النهر في الأردن. وإذا لاحظت، وأظن أنه هذا أيضا جزء من التاريخ والجغرافيا، إذا لاحظت غياب الأسماء واستخدام الضمائر داخل النص وتعدد الرواية الواحدة من عدة زوايا. يمكن سام أفكاري تصلوا أسرع لأنه يعني كان ضحية عمليا، كان ضحية الترجمة. هذه يعني الجغرافيا والتاريخ. يعني مفترض شكله بطل في هذا العمل أو الشخصية الرئيسية في هذا العمل.
So in addition to memory, also geography is a very important theme in my work. Describing the past is, the setting is a refugee camp, a small refugee camp east of the Jordan River. If you read the text, you realize that there is an absence of names. There's a lot of pronouns, so there's this, yes, seated. And also the names of the main characters change.
كل هذا الاسماء الموفله للمناطق والجغرافيا والمكان والشخصيه الرئيسيه.
So the absence of names, the pronouns, all of them become a main character inside the text itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring up geography because. I mean, especially as you said, like, you know, especially being Palestinian, you cannot really escape a certain kind of politics, and it's actually geopolitics. We're talking about actual scars on the land. We're talking about partition, and I use the word partition here because we in India also understand the word partition, which happened around the same time, 1 year before.
Yeah.
But in this novel, for instance, there is also there is Zakaria, a place, this character. I believe from what I read, Zakaria was the name of the village or the place where your parents came from, and so that's. I mean, I find that really. It's and the sense of symbolism becomes so important in the novels, which is what is very poetic also, and so tell us more about your relationship with geography and how that comes up in your books, your poetry and non-poetic work.
المخيم اللي هو مخيم الكرامة في وصف الماضي على شرقي النهر ممكن نعتبره معادل أو نعتبر زكريا اللي هي المكان الذي تم التهجير منه، يعني القرية اللي تم تهجير أهلها ومنهم أسرتي. القرية وضعها خاص. بهذا عودة لسؤالك لسام، إذا كنا إحنا ناقشنا الموضوع بصراحة، حتى يعني ناقشنا بالتفاصيل، يمكن تحدثنا عن ما هي خصوصية زكريا القرية اللي ممكن أنا أحكي عنها يعني هلا، يعني بعض التفاصيل. تقع القرية، هذه القرية تقع في وسط فلسطين تماما، ولأمر ما أو ربما بسبب الموقع، أنا يعني لن أذهب بعيدا في البحث الجغرافي والتاريخي. في هذه القرية التوراة تتحدث عن أنه يوشع بن نون هزم الكنعانيين في التل الكبير، ولكن في نفس القرية أيضا اختارها الجيوش العربية الإسلامية اللي قادمة من الجزيرة، اختاروا السهل هناك أيضا لهزيمة الروم، يعني معركة أجنادين اللي فتحت مش بس فلسطين، كل بلاد الشام أمام الجيوش الإسلامية. أيضا اختاروا هذه القرية في نفس الوقت، يعني اللي هي تتمتع بموقع خاص. يوجد 3 مقامات مقدسة مختلفة بشكل مطلق عن، يعني هناك مثلا المقام المرأة الوحيدة، مقام المقدس للمرأة لا يوجد أمن، هو الوحيد اللي امرأة، البقية رجال طبعا، اللي هي فاطمة بنت بري، وهي امرأة متصوفة قادمة من العراق، ولأمر ما مقامها لها مقام في هذه القرية.
I need to translate. So speaking, the question was about geography. Yes, geography is very important in my work. If you read Describing the Past, again, it's Al-Karama refugee camp. It's the Karama refugee camp that Ghassan grew up in actually. Or Zakaria. Zakaria is a Palestinian village that is placed in the middle of Palestine, where it was occupied by the Israelis in 1948, and people were dispossessed and they were forced to flee the village. Among them were Ghassan's parents. So the village is very particular in the sense, again, of its location. So it has always been chosen as a battlefield or a strategic setting throughout different historic eras. It's mentioned in the Old Testament. And also the Arab armies that came from Mesopotamia to Palestine used its valley as their dwelling point. And it's interesting because it's such a small village, yet it has 3 different sacred shrines. One of them is for a woman, which is not very customary in Palestine because most of the shrines are for men, prophets, and so there's also a female shrine, temple, maqam in the city.
بالإضافة لمقام النبي زكريا، أنا أحاول أن أقول إنه يعني كل هذا التنوع القادم من طبقات حضارية من التاريخ، مش من طبقة واحدة، من عدة طبقات، كله تجمع في مساحة صغيرة جدا. القرية عمرها 4000 سنة. لك أن تتخيل الطبقات الحضارية التي مرت عليها. هي قريبة من القدس وبيت لحم. السكان عمليا يقوموا بتدوير أسماء الأنبياء بينهم، يعني أجيال كاملة من الأسماء متتالية. أيضا هذا تم النقاش مع سام. القرية كلها تدور في حوالي 100 اسم يتم تكرارهم على النساء والرجال جيل بعد جيل. الفكرة هنا ممكن تكون أكثر تعقيدا من مجرد شرحها في جلسة، ولكن أنا حاولت أبين التعددية المطلقة والكثافة اللي بتمتع فيها الكثافة التاريخية اللي بتمتع فيها المكان الجغرافي هنا.
So what's interesting also about Zakaria, the place, is the diversity that comes with this very rich history of different layers of civilizations. Zakaria is 4,000 years old as a city, so you can imagine, or a village, so you can imagine how many civilizations have inhabited this place. And it's interesting that the population of Zakaria keep on using the same names, naming the same on the basis of names for prophets. Like the whole village uses 100 names that are constantly used all the time, and one of them is Zakaria.
That's awesome. But you know, you have had to, by choice or otherwise, live in other parts of the Arab world. Lebanon, no, Jordan, I forget. Tunisia. Last time we met, you spoke about Tunisia. Has that affected the way you write?
أنت عشت بدول عربية كثير منها لبنان وتونس وسوريا، كيف هذا أثر على كتابتك؟ أو هل أثر على كتابتك؟
لا بالتأكيد، يعني أنا في رأيي إنه أنا استفدت إلى حد كبير، يعني خلال سنوات المنفى من تجولي في المناطق العربية من شمال أفريقيا في تونس عشت فيها عدة سنوات، إلى سوريا في آسيا اللي هي عشت فيها برضه عدة سنوات، بيروت، عمان طبعا، اليمن. لا شك إنه أنا مدين لهذه المدن وهذه البلاد، يعني يعني في هناك اطلاع على تجارب جديدة، على حركة ثقافية مختلفة، على مشهد مختلف. المشهد الثقافي في شمال أفريقيا مختلف تماما، ومصادره مختلفة تماما، مصادره فرانكفونية عن المشهد مثلا في آسيا. أنا أتحدث عن الدول العربية هنا، يعني عن اللي ممكن يكون مصادره أيضا مختلفة، بس في النهاية المصدر كله متوسطي. لا استفدت، و يعني أجد أحيانا إنه موجودة في هاي الخبرات، وهاي الخبرات اللي أنا اكتسبتها من هاي المدن موجودة فيما أكتب.
So yes, definitely. Ghassan spent many years in the exile before the peace process in 1994 when he finally was allowed, this is a footnote by me, when the Palestinians, the Israelis signed the Oslo Accords and many Palestinians were able for the first time to come back to Palestine. So Ghassan was among them. But for around 20 years he did the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the trip or voyage. He lived in Beirut, he lived in Tunisia. They left Beirut on a boat to Yemen for 6 months. He also lived in Syria. And you know, of course, we speak of the Arab region as one entity, but in reality, it's very diverse. We have North Africa, the Levant, our area, and also the Gulf. So moving between Tunisia, which is in North Africa, which is influenced very much by the Francophone culture, to Syria and Lebanon, which is more influenced by Arab and Asian culture, and Yemen as well, all this has incredibly contributed to Ghassan's writing. And this you can see the difference between writers who were forced to stay in Palestine because they were geographically isolated from the Arab region. We were not allowed to travel in the Arab world. So like me, who was born and raised in Palestine, not in the diaspora and the exile. And this is a footnote from me, so sometimes you see the difference between the people,
yes, that's fascinating.
Yes, who've acquired all this experience and have lived in communities of Palestinians and non-Palestinians in the Arab region, as opposed to the Palestinians who stayed and were under occupation. There are differences, actually.
Yes. I mean, such a crime to actually, imprison people and at the same time throw other people out. It's fascinating, and yeah, that it must have been amazing to actually come back after all those years. But I want to kind of trace further back, since we are talking about different parts of your life. Something that we always ask writers, because we're always fascinated with writers, how did your first book come about? How did what was it like to be able to write publicly and be published? And I just read a fantastic story in one of Fadi's introductions about, because I think it was your first book that came out just before the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. And we're laughing, but it's really quite something. It'll be great if you can talk about that.
هو ما يعني الحكايه حقيقيه اللي رواها فادي جوده. هو الكتاب الاول الحقيقي، لانه انا هناك كتاب قصته اكثر طرافه يعني، ولكن الكتاب الاول اللي صدر بارادتي او بارادتي صدر قبل الاجتياح الاسرائيلي لبيروت بتقريبا اسبوعين او 3 أسابيع، وحصلت منه على 15 نسخه. اسمه اسباب قديمه. وطبعا يعني بالغ السعاده، انا يعني شاب، ويعني اول كتاب في بيروت، وبيروت كانت في ذلك الحين هي يعني جزيره للثقافه العربيه، كانت المشهد العربي الثقافي في ذروته. الحقيقه كان في بيروت تحت مظله منظمه التحرير في تلك الفترات كل المعارضه العربيه، اليسار العربي، الشعراء الكبار والكتاب الكبار كانوا هناك. بالنسبه لهم بيروت كانت اشبه بجنه الحريه او الكتابه. فانا يصدر لك كتاب في هذا الجو، يعني كان يعني نوع من ولكن حصلت على 15 نسخه اظن او اكثر قليلا، وضعتها في البيت قبل الحصول على بقيه النسخ او قبل توزيع بقيه النسخ. يمكن وزعوا 100 او 200 لا احد يعرف، دار النشر. بدأ الاجتياح الإسرائيلي للبنان وقصف البيت مع 15 نسخة، ما تمكنتش من العودة إلى قصف في اليوم الأول الحقيقة للحرب. وأظن في الأسبوع الثاني قصفت مخازن دار النشر اللي دار العودة في ذلك الحين، واحترقت مش كتابي فقط الحقيقة، احترقت كتب معظم الكتاب العرب اللي بيطبعوا في دار العودة في ذلك الوقت.
So this is actually Fadi Juda's story is very true. My first book, Old Reasons, called Asbab Qadima, was published 2 weeks before the Israeli invasion of Beirut in 1982. Ghassan, as I said, was living in Beirut at the time. So he was given, and Beirut at the time, it was a very important city. It was considered the oasis of Arab culture, and particularly during the PLO presence in Beirut, because many of the Arab intellectuals, writers, and opposition all came to join the resistance in the city, and the Palestinian resistance, and this added to this wealth of the cultural life in the city. So what happened is, because the books came out 2 weeks before the invasion, he received 15 copies and left them at home, and the house was bombarded, and of course he lost the books. But also the storage spaces for the publisher were also later bombarded. So all of his books, in addition to other writers' publications and books, were all completely demolished. So his first book, it was difficult to have a copy of it.
نعم. أنا اللي وجدت منه يعني الرحلة خلف هذا الكتاب عجيبة. وجدت منه نسخ في الجزائر مثلا، وجدت نسخة أو نسختين، وجدت منه نسخة في مكتبة من مكتبات عمان، مكتبة الحكومية يعني المكتبة الرسمية. بعض الأصدقاء وصلهم بطريقة ما، بعدين صورنا.
So it's interesting to trace the story of how I was able recently to get copies of the book. I found one in Algeria, I found one in a public library in Jordan, some were found by friends all around the Arab world, and that's how I could retrieve an original copy of the book, which is photocopied now, in case of another bombardment. Never know.
At that time, they were many Arab writers.
Hello.
You were going to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, well, no, but yeah. So it's
Difficult sometimes locating your own books. But how? I mean, Sam, how do you locate books that you would like to translate, for instance?
I don't really have an
Some
answer
have
to
been
that.
bombed and some you don't.
Yeah. I just read, talk to people. It's not easy necessarily. Publishing the whole what we think of as the infrastructure of the publishing world does not really. It's a separate world from the Arabic publishing world. I mean, it can be very difficult. Even with Ghassan's work, who must be, by this point, one of the most recognized figures outside of the Arabic world. That's a recent development, but it's certainly true. Even finding Ghassan's work in Arabic is not a simple task. Of course, you can, but you would have to have a pretty good contact who can find lots of books in Beirut and Cairo and so on. That's just to give an example of the difficulties still that are faced. I mean, but your question really was how to find what to translate. I think a quote that I like from Frank O'Hara, he said, well, I'm paraphrasing, but you just go on your nerve in all things. That's all you do. If someone's chasing you down the street, if someone tries to steal your wallet on the street, you don't turn around and yell, "Hey, give it up! I was a track star at Mini on the prep." You just run down the street. So I don't think that there's a. I think you just
Strategy.
Not a lot of strategy. Just,
Yeah.
What happens.
Yeah, that's right. Well, another interesting thing I read about you also from Fadi's article, is he says that, okay, you sent him some books because he was, this volume of poetry came out in English translation last year. Yeah, you sent him some old books of yours, but the published poems were heavily edited by you into something new. You kind of cut out things and put in other things. So that's interesting. That's, what he was talking about in terms of memory, which is not fixed, kind of flowing thing, but his work, which one would
بانفتاح. يعني انا اترك الابواب مفتوحه، انا الحقيقه لا اضع نصوصي في اقفاص واغلق عليها واكتب تحتها كتبت بتاريخ كذا في اليوم الفلاني، يعني وانتهت علاقتها. لا، انا في رايي انه ممكن العوده لها، ممكن نفس النص يستدعي اضافات او يستدعي حذف من الحمولة الزائدة الموجودة فيه. النص مفتوح وقابل للحياة وقابل للتطور، يعني وهذا لا يلغي الالتزام بالذاكرة، بل بالعكس يعني بنقيها وبنظفها ويعيد تركيبها. بدي بس نقطة، يعيد تركيبها يعني العودة للسؤال الأول، بتفككها وبتركبها. هذا أيضا يعني حتى أكون منسجم مع نفسي له علاقة بمفهومي للترجمة، إنه أيضا في موضوع نقلها من مكان، من لغة إلى لغة، من حيز إلى حيز، النصوص أيضا قابلة للتكيف يعني مع الفضاء الجديد وتتنفس الهواء الجديد اللي بدها تكون فيه.
So to answer this question, it's important that we agree that on this important concept is that texts are not sacred. And for me, as a writer, as a poet, I don't believe that texts are sacred. I approach my texts, whether it's prose or poetry, with openness. I don't lock them and lose the key. I always leave space for change. I believe that the text itself can invite change. As I said, with memory as well. Memory is not a static thing, the same with the text. Sometimes I find the urge to dismantle the memory or the text and reconstruct it. It's the same process. The same applies for translation as well. Inviting new spaces, reacting and having a dialogue and a reaction with the environment is what I do. It defines my relationship with the text I write.
That sounds awesome. Sorry. I wanted to talk about something very specific, which is you have also edited what's it called? Editor for PLO's literary magazine. I forget the name. Al-Bada. Bayada. So that you've also been a literary editor for the literary page of the Al-Ayam newspaper. These are very different kinds of responsibilities beyond writing your own text. Can you share more about your experience and what was the political responsibility of that, of perhaps publishing other voices, newer important voices, and what were the challenges?
أنت كمان بالإضافة يعني عملك كشاعر، أنت كمان محرر لبعض الصحف والمجلات الثقافية مثل بيادر، مثل الشعراء، مثل أيام الثقافية. شو المسؤولية من أي شو مسؤوليتك تجاه هذه يعني تسميع هاي الأصوات المسؤولية السياسية؟ يعني كيف بتلاقي هاي المساحات هي مجال تفسح المجال ده؟
يعني أنا أجد إنه مثل هذه المنابر عندما تكون جدية، سواء القسم الثقافي في صحيفة يومية أو مجلة ثقافية متخصصة. جزء أساسي من دورها هي فتح المجال أمام أصوات جديدة ومواهب جديدة حتى تقدم تجاربها. هي مهمتها الكشف، ليس فقط أن تقوم بوعظ أو بتعليم أو بتقديم النصائح الفوقية من جيل إلى جيل أو من مدرسة إلى مدرسة، لا. يعني هي مهمتها فتح الباب عريض أمام هذه التجارب، يعني حتى تمنح أول شيء التجارب الجديدة والأسماء الجديدة والأصوات الجديدة، تمنحها الثقة في أن تكون مطبوعة ومحتفى بها من جهة. ثانيا أيضا تضع عليها جزء من مسؤولية أنها تكون ظاهرة. نعم، أنا بدعي أنه أنا بالأماكن التي عملت فيها ومن فترة مبكرة، ربما لأني أنا كنت في شبابي في البي ار او عمليا، يعني ملتحق في المؤسسات الشبيبية وفي يعني كنت معني بأنه أقدم في هاي المنابر التجارب الجديدة، الأصوات الواعدة طبعا، اللي قطعت شوط أولي، يعني قطعت العتبة. هي مسؤولية ثقافية وأخلاقية وسياسية أيضا.
So yes, I perceive such forms like whether it's the specialized cultural magazine that I edited or the weekly cultural supplement of Al Ayyam newspaper in Palestine, as platforms for new voices. And this is not only for writers but also for other forms of people working in creative field, for filmmakers, for musicians and so on. And the importance of these tools or forums is that they introduce new voices. The approach that I've used is not to lecture or to label or to frame people between young and old generation or classical contemporary. It's like there are no boundaries, and the most important thing is the quality and the prospect of these emerging young voices, that there is a promise that these experiences will be developed and materialized in the future. This is important for our young artists and writers because it gives them confidence that their work is worthwhile, confidence to continue pursuing their careers in these fields, and make them also more responsible, because now as they try that they're more read and more known, with this also comes responsibility. So this, in this way, I've been editing these magazines.
Yes, absolutely. I completely understand. How you know.
I just hold.
Okay, no, I think you're a little tired of talking.
We could take a question.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think we can take questions. Let's try and focus on aspects that we already haven't talked about, or if the aspects of our talk, any part of that really interests you greatly, please feel free to ask. Yes.
Hi. Ahlan wa sahlan. I lived in Lebanon a couple of years, many years ago. I am going to ask you a very simple question. I think everybody in this room are aware of the terrible struggle the Palestinians had through literature, through ballads by Amal Marcus and others. I am going to raise two very simple points, very, very simple actually. One is, I was very fascinated and found that the Arabs are very fond of dabke dances. And I would like to know how these sort of traditions can break down cultural barriers, as you are always talking about breaking down barriers. Another point I have noticed, there is a lot, quite a number of Jewish immigrants in Israel who came from Arabic countries, and they're singing in Arabic, like Aywa. And I wonder if there is a sort of a development in that way to interconnect the Arabic Jewish peoples, because I tell you one small incident. I was in Dubai and the taxi driver was listening to a music, and I asked him, who is the singer? And he mentioned that it's Aywa from Israel, you see. So I wonder if that sort of development has any influence in the Palestinian society. So these are the two simple points I would like to mention.
Okay. They're not very simple, but let me tell you. طيب السؤال الأول على دراسة الدبكة. أنت حكيت كثير بمداخلاتك عن كسر الحواجز، تجاوز الحواجز. هل بتشعر إنه الدبكة ممكن يكون لها تقليدية لها دور في كسر الحواجز؟ هذا واحد. السؤال الثاني له علاقة إذا فهمته صح بالمهاجرين اليهود من الدول العربية لإسرائيل. يعني شو علاقتنا إحنا كفلسطينية فيهم؟ كيف يعني هل هناك نوع من أنواع التواصل؟ شو رأيك بالتواصل؟
أول شيء يعني السؤال الثاني جزء كبير منه عم تحاول الرواية إنها تناقشه. اليهود الفلسطينيين اللي كانوا يعيشوا في فلسطين قبل الهجرة والهجرة اليهودية العربية، يعني هذا إلى حد ما طبعا لا يطرح الكتاب أي حلول بقدر ما هو بحرك شخصيات داخل النص، لأنه أنا في رأيي أنه هذا سؤال مهم جدا لم يسأل بشكل جدي خلال ال70 سنة الأخيرة. كنا في حديث ثنائي أنا وسام، وأنا في رأيي أنه الكتاب يعني جزء من يعني إحدى الشخصيات الرئيسية الغائبة في الكتاب هي شخصية اليهودي الفلسطيني أو اليهودية الفلسطينية، اللي أظن أنا أنه هذولا كانوا الضحية الأساسية عام 48، لأنهم فقدوا من جهة روايتهم اللي هي الرواية الفلسطينية، ولا علاقة لهم بشكل جدي بالرواية القادمة، رواية المهاجرين اليهود القادمين من أوروبا أو من أماكن أخرى، وفقدوا نسيجهم الاجتماعي مع هجرة الفلسطينيين إلى مناطق أخرى. هذا جانب مهم، ويعني شكرا فعلا على السؤال، لأنه كان لازم نعمل إشارة أثناء الحديث حول الموضوع. كما بقية الرقصات التراثية الفلكلورية ذات أهمية كبيرة يعني في الثقافة الشعبية، وبالنسبة للفلسطينيين أظن لها أهمية مضاعفة لأنه كان لها دور في الحفاظ على الهوية الثقافية الشعبية.
So I'll start from the end.
في أضيف إنه أنا بنتي هون وهي يعني إحدى اللي بتعلموا الدبكة ومن الناجحات فيها.
So I'll start with Salma. Stand up, Salma. Salma is Ghassan's daughter, my daughter too. She's a professional dabke dancer actually, and that's why I would address the second question at the beginning. Dabke is very important for Palestinians, as you know, and it's not only important for Palestinians, it's important for the whole region. Lebanon, Iraq, Palestine, Syria, Iraq less, Jordan. So dabke is the traditional form of dance that is very common in the region, and that people at weddings, in political demonstrations use, but also is being emphasized as important for kids to learn because of its role in protecting the Palestinian identity. So that's why it's really highly emphasized, although now Palestine is more open to teaching new forms of dance, like contemporary jazz and other forms, and we've had a festival for contemporary, a contemporary dance festival in Palestine was established 12 years ago. Yet dabka remains very important because I think its importance is higher for Palestinians than around because of the occupation and because of the need to emphasize the Palestinian identity. Now, the other question is much more complex. Ghassan thanks you for raising this question because he believes that he should have raised it actually as he was talking. You've mentioned Arab Jews who came to Israel after 1948. But Ghassan also wishes to talk about the Palestinian Jews who were living in Palestine before the Israeli invasion. So it's a reciprocal process. There are two forms of Jews who are part now of Israel who have different pasts. The Palestinian Jews who were living with Palestinians, the catastrophe or the Nakba or the occupation was very devastating also for many of them, because they lost the social fabric. The Palestinians who fled the cities were part of this social fabric. So they lost this social fabric and this identity. Many of them identified as Palestinian Jews. And they had to integrate within this Western Jewish waves of immigration that are completely different than their local context. The same about Jews in the Arab world. The history and how they moved to Israel, this is all important, and this is a brave and important question because it's often neglected. Yeah? And in Israeli societies, many of them, still listen to Arabic music, but they have issues of integration. This is from me. Within that's a very complex issue as well. For us as Palestinians, when it comes to religion, the continuity is not there with the Arab Jews. But when the issue is culture, of course it's natural, because it's very much the same culture. Would you like to say?
I would just add that the book, Where the Bird Disappeared, has a lot to do with this last question that we're talking about Palestinian Jews and that story having been not come to the fore very much and not talked about very much. But there's an Arab Jewish, Moroccan Jewish character in the book, and there's also a Palestinian Jewish woman who's a character in the book, and so you can. It's very relevant to the new book.
Thank you. Okay, I see lots of hands, but I saw this gentleman's hand before. Sorry. Okay.
My concern, I feel that through cultural events and literature, how the conflicts and tussles are measured, and are there any final or solutions are found by people? Are they concerned very much and focus on them, that how we can relate to each other in future? Is there something happening through cultural and literature events? Is there such thing or writing, etc.?
You mean between the Palestinian and Israeli?
In that whole place.
I understand correctly.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what he's talking about is already cultural dialogues happening between Israel and Palestine, and is there any hope of solution through something like that or something? Yeah.
This is a tough question.
يعني هو الحوار بالتأكيد بالسياق المثالي أو بالسياق الطبيعي الحوار هو الحل. ولكن أنت يعني الآن أنا في رأيي من الصعب إقامة حوار بين شعب أو ثقافة تحت الاحتلال وثقافة محتلة. لأن السؤال الأساسي في الموضوع أنا في رأيي الصراع في جوهره ثقافي. والحوار هو يعني هو الحل الوحيد. ولكن السياسيين هم اللي بيقوموا برواية الرواية الآن يعني وهذا ما أدى إلى وصولنا لطرق مسدودة. إذا الحوار هو البحث عن سلام أو عدالة أو هذا سؤال بصراحة ممكن ينسأل ايش اقول عموس عوز او جروسمان نتنياهو لانه عنه عمليا انه لا يوجه عمليا لا يوجه للفلسطينيين. في العاده هذا السؤال يوجه للفلسطينيين رغم انه مش الفلسطينيين هم اصحاب القرار بالحوار او عدم الحوار. يعني هناك في احتلال، هناك في دولة تصر أن تسمى بالدولة اليهودية ترفض إطلاقا أي دور للفلسطينيين أو أي مكان للفلسطينيين في الحل، تقصي الثقافة الفلسطينية تماما. حتى المثقفين الفلسطينيين اللي حملوا الجنسية الإسرائيلية واللي هم بشكل 20% من سكان إسرائيل، هذول أيضا ما بيملكوش يعني حقوق كافية. أنا في رأيي السؤال سياسي في يعني يوجه للسياسيين المثقفين، دورهم ضعيف سواء في المجتمع الإسرائيلي بهذا الاتجاه، أنا أقصد اتجاه الدفع نحو حوار، دورهم ضعيف. والمثقفين الفلسطينيين أيضا يعني غير قادرين على فتح حوار مع في غياب الموضوع الحوار نفسه اللي هو العدالة نفسها.
Okay, I will try my best to translate. So, in an ideal world, yes, dialogue is a solution, should be the solution. The case with Palestine, it's a bit complex because it's hard to do an equal dialogue when you have an occupier and a country under occupation. We are not speaking about the process of reconciliation after ending the occupation of Palestine. That would be different. So, speaking of dialogue without this process of recognition of Palestinian rights and starting a reconciliation process is probably not the best way to do it, because it's not an even or balanced power between the two. One is the occupier and the other is living under occupation. The sad thing is that at the moment in Palestine and Israel, it's the politicians who are telling the story. The story is written by the politicians, not by the artists or the intellectuals. Their influence is very limited. And the question of whether dialogue works or not is normally addressed to Palestinians, whereas in reality it should be addressed to the Israelis because they have the upper hand in the negotiation process, and they are the occupiers. So, and they should be able to answer this question. Is Netanyahu willing to dialogue with Palestinians? Is the government willing to recognize the rights of Palestinians? Is the government willing to recognize all the international UN resolutions and so on in favor of establishing a Palestinian state or not? So the question should be reversed. Of course, it is sad because yes, Ghassan thinks that it would be better if artists and had more influence and say in the process. But at this point, it's actually a political decision. I just want to add that even if you come to Palestine and Israel, you will see that there are clear divisions between Palestinians' land and Israeli lands. That for Palestinians like us who live in Palestine, the only Israelis we see are the army or the settlers who live illegally in our territories. This is the only encounter. Ghassan also mentioned that you have to remember that there is 1.5 million Palestinians living inside Israel. They did not live in 1948. They stayed and they had Israeli passports. They're citizens of the state of Israel. They don't serve in the army, but they're citizens. And there is a lot of discrimination and isolation to them as well. So it's a very complex dilemma. And again, the question should be addressed to the people who have the power, because the Palestinians have been trying to start dialogue and it has not been working.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I'll come to you.
I think my question right now has become pretty simple. In terms of translation, how do you know when your work is being translated properly, that the right word is being used to convey the meaning that you want it to?
اوكي يعني اللي هو
بالنسبة للترجمة، أنت تعرف إنه تم ترجمة نصوصك بالطريقة اللي أنت بدك إياها.
يعني مش دائما بتكون الامور سهله. يمكن بدي اجيب نموذج لما ترجمت مختارات للغه الصينيه وارسل لي، ويعني بالتاكيد كانوا مترجمين جيدين، ولكن لانه كانوا باشراف شاعر كبير اللي هو الشاعر الصيني الكبير بيداو اللي كان محرر، ولكن انا اتذكر انه وصلتني اوراق النصوص حوالي 40 صفحه او 50 صفحه، وكان معي يمكن 48 ساعه او 72 ساعه لابداء الراي في الترجمه. ف صعب احيانا الحصول على يعني على معرفه بالضبط الى اي مدى. ربما باللغه الانجليزيه انا بالنسبه لي اقرب، لانه عندي قدره على القراءه بالانجليزيه. احيانا انا لا احظى بترجمه جيده كما الاخرين يعني، وهذه تكتشف في الغالب يمكن بعد الطباعه. لكن هناك يعني هناك المترجم نفسه خبرته مهارته بتكون عمليا واضحه اذا كانت يعني انا مثلا محظوظ وقلت هذا الحكي بفادي جودة الذي ترجم أشعاري بكتابين مختارات كبيرة، واحد لييل يونيفرسيتي بريس والثاني لكبر كانيون. أنا محظوظ فيه لأنه هو شاعر خبرته بالترجمة جيدة. ترجم محمود درويش اللي هو شاعر بالتأكيد ترجمته يعني ستعطي دفعة كبيرة جدا. سام شاعر، ما بقولش هيك دائما، بس قريب رؤيته للترجمة أو مفهومه للترجمة، خلينا نتعامل قريب من مفهومي. في هناك نقاش بيننا، أسئلة متبادلة بالتفاصيل وكذا، هذه ممكن تساعد يعني. ولكن أنا كما قلت بالبداية أنا ضد الأمانة في الترجمة. يعني أنا ضد فكرة النقل، يعني اللي قد تكون يعني دقيقة ومرسومة. لا، المترجم لا يجب أن يكون موجود في النص الجديد يعني، وذلك هو بده يكون شريك.
So it varies really. For example, some of my work was translated to Chinese a while ago, and then suddenly I received an email with this Chinese text. I had 48 hours to review the text and give feedback, which is obviously impossible to do. So in that cases, there's little input that I can add when the language is very different. And sometimes, if there's a problem with the text, we will discover it later as more people read it and realize there's a problem, but this doesn't happen very often. With English, it's a bit easier because Ghassan can read English and can actually speak English.
He's just been pretending otherwise.
Ghassan has been very lucky for having Fadi Joudet and Sam as translators. Fadi Joudet, who is of Palestinian origin, he's an emergency doctor who lives in Texas. He's also a poet himself, so he has this sensibility and this sensitivity to the text as a poet and as an Arab speaker as well. And with Sam, as he said from the beginning, there is this open dialogue about Ghassan's work, questions, investigations. It's a joint voyage. It's a journey. And as Ghassan said from the beginning, he's really not too concerned with faithfulness when it comes to translation. He really thinks the translator is a partner to the creative process that invites also his own work, his own self, a bit of his essence into the translated text. So.
Okay.
This is a very simple question. Thank you very much, all three of you, for your articulation of a country that I have visited lately, that's both Palestine and Israel. I'm extremely fond and I want to go back again. But this is a popular question, a political and popular question, which eventually, I think, at the bottom line of all that you all have said is concerned with human expression, whether it's through poetry or literature or whatever, in whatever language. Now, as a poet and as a writer, how would you people react to Jerusalem, which may become the capital, as Mr. Trump wishes, to be the capital of Israel? How would the people and the poet in you and the writer in the other person react? I know it's a very difficult, but I'm very curious to know. Thank you.
ردة فعلك ككاتب كإنسان على قرار اللي عمله ترامب إنه it's the decision that it's Trump, the name of Trump.
Everyone's shudder.
على يعني إنه
أنا أرجو يعني أنه هو قرار لا يتمتع بأي حكمة ولا يغير شيء. يعني كنا نتحدث عن مساحة القدس الشرقية، الثقافة، السكان، يعني نتحدث عن القدس الشرقية، نتحدث عن ثقافة، عن عادات يومية، من المعمار إلى الكتابة إلى المسرح، عن حياة كاملة بتنشأ هناك. يعني سيكون من الغباء يعني انه تقرر شخص، او بغض النظر انه هو رئيس الولايات المتحده، وانا لا اقلل من خطوره انه قرر واشنطن دي سي انه يرسل هذه المدينه لتكون تحت ولايه نتنياهو مثلا. هذا شعبيا مرفوض. ما نتحدثش بس عن الفلسطينيين، لانه القدس مش موضوع اماكن مقدسه فقط. القدس 250,000 فلسطيني بيعيشوا غاد، لهم ممتدين فعلا لمئات السنوات، اذا ما قلناش الاف السنوات. انا رايي انه هذا اولا كان القرار كان صادم فعلا، رغم انه انا في رايي انه اسرائيل تقوم بتهويد القدس او بالاستيلاء عليها او بمحاوله تغيير هويتها وقتلها اقتصاديا واختراقها بالمستوطنات، تدمير التعليم بتكون في الموضوع هذا عمليا من عام 68 او 69، يعني في فترات حزب العمل ثم فترات حزب الليكود، والان في فتره يعني لم تتوقف عن ذلك. كل الحكومات الاسرائيليه لم تتوقف عن محاوله تهيئه القدس بعد احتلالها عام 67 ليتم تهويدها. ورغم ذلك كل ما حصل هو تضييق حياة الناس. هوية المدينة لا تزال كما هي، ومشاعر الناس لا تزال كما هي. أنا فعلا بتحدث عن رفض مطلق أقرب إلى الصدمة، مش فلسطيني بس، فلسطيني وعربي وأوروبي والعالم كله. يعني اللي احتفلوا في القرار هم نتنياهو وترامب وليبرمان، يعني عمليا اللي احتفلوا هذا القرار. ولكن تستطيع تشوفي العالم كيف يعني كله بنظر له.
So, in my opinion, this decision that was made by Trump to move the embassy to Jerusalem, thus declaring Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, lacks good judgment and wisdom. It's not a coincidence that other U.S. presidents, though they had the resolution, did not make this move. Of course, it came as a shock, not only to Palestinians, but to the entire international community, and you see the reaction from the EU, European countries, Arab countries, and so on. The complexity about Jerusalem is that it's not only a political issue, it's a cultural issue. Palestinians have been in Jerusalem and Arabs for centuries, for hundreds of years. So if you go to East Jerusalem, there's 250,000 of Palestinians who have daily habits in the city, who go to its schools, who you look at the architecture, you see the Palestinian Arab architecture. So it's not, this cannot be erased by a stupid decision or a reckless decision, if you wish. The people are there and they are determined to continue living there. There are some families who've been living for hundreds, 500, 600 years in the old city of Jerusalem or in Jerusalem as a whole. The alarming part, it's not necessarily Trump's decision, but it's the relentless efforts of the consecutive Israeli governments at the Israelization of Jerusalem. There have been attempts, systematic attempts of destroying education for Palestinians, of denying Palestinians the right to live in the city, confiscating Palestinian land, building more settlements. This is the real threat on ground. Yeah? The only people who actually rejoiced for the decision to declare Jerusalem as the capital of Israel were only Netanyahu and Trump. But the rest of the world, almost all of it, was against this move because it's much more complex.
I'll look here first, and then I'll come to you. No, we're recording. It's not about that.
So mine is not a political question. When you're talking about writing, particularly describing the past, in a small place like Zakaria, how do you, manage to not intervene into other people's stories? The way you described it as a close, small community. When you're working on your own memory, how do you respect what everybody else went through and not intervene in their stories or try and retain their past? Is it a difficult process to maintain it to just your account of view?
زكريا ما كانت صغيرة كثير وتركز فيها على ذاتها الشخصية، على روايتها الشخصية، كيف بهاي البروسس تقدر تكتب روايات الآخرين للمدينة، للرواية نفسها، للأحداث نفسها؟
يعني هي مش رواية شخصية، هي ذاكرة آخرين أنا قمت بالتصرف فيها. ربما تحت مسؤولية إحساسي بأني أبحث عن حمايتهم، أحاول أن أخرجهم من النسيان، محاولة إبقائهم على قيد الحياة حتى بعد أو إبقاء روايتهم. أنا في رأيي هاي سير آخرين، سير آخرين في مجملها أو في تركيبها أو في إعادة تدويرها تتحول لسيرة للمكان نفسه. فعمليا أنا يعني أقوم برعاية ذاكرتهم، برعاية روايتهم عن المكان بالرواية أو في العمل الأدبي اللي هو راح تجد أيضا اختلاف في النصوص، اختلاف حول كل شيء في المكان بما فيهم اختلاف حول الشجرة، وفي عدة روايات لكل شيء. لا يوجد يقين، لا يوجد يقين، احتمالات مفتوحة.
Okay. So what I tried to do in this novel is to borrow the memory of others. I did not live in Zakaria myself. I did not use my personal memory. I tried to borrow the memory of the people who lived in the village. I did that because I really wanted to protect them from forgetfulness. I did that because I was cautious of the fact that throughout time and the migration and immigration and the refuge of Palestinians, some stories would be lost in the process. So for me, this novel is more like biographies of different characters. And collectively, these biographies become the story of the place, of the geography of Zakaria as a village. if you read the text, you realize that there are multiple narrations for the same story. The idea is that the book is not about certainty. In fact, it's about uncertainty, different possibilities, different scenarios, different, yeah.
Thank you very much for this wonderful interactive session. Now, my question is that, because translation plays a very pivotal role in this discussion, my question is that there should be a possibility of our poets' works to be translated in various other languages of India, especially Bangla. Now, given the context that Netanyahu visiting India and India moving towards more into right-wing politics, how do you see the future in the translation of Palestinian poets' works to be translated in various languages of India?
هلا الوضع بالهند شوي صعب لانه الحكومه يمينيه فعم بيصير في تغييرات، والسؤال هل تشعر انه في مستقبل لترجمه الشعر مثلا الفلسطيني او العربي واللغات الهنديه المختلفه ما فيها البنغالي في ظل هاي الظروف؟
يعني ما يعني معلوماتي او معرفتي حول الامر يعني ما بتسمح لي يعني هذا السؤال ممكن توجهه لنبيل.
Well, yeah, I mean, probably Ghassan is not familiar with the translation scene in India.
It's not really.
What's the question?
The question is whether, with the present government moving to right wing in India, will in the future be an interest in translating, for example, Arabic literature into Indian languages such as Bengali and other languages?
Yeah, I think so. In fact, I've already asked him to curate a list. So.
So yes, the answer is yes.
Answer is yes.
As long as you have publishing houses.
Okay, we just have time for a couple questions. Did you have a question? Okay.
Hi. While reading about you, I found out that when you won the Griffith Prize in Canada, I think it was in 2013, you had some visa troubles, and also previous to that, there was some delaying tactics, and I'm beginning to think, based on what I read, that it's becoming a kind of a trend. And I saw a lot of fantastic poet tributes about that, some of them memorable as well. Now I know that memory is important to you. I read your first book and it was there, and you say there the same thing, that to remember, otherwise you'll forget it. So, do these experiences, do these inform, do they change your writing, do they impact your writing? Do you kind of quietly rebel to your words, to your writing, or you take it in your stride and you ignore them and just go about telling the stories that you want to? Because I think in one of the interviews you said that that even going to visa office, I don't know where that is, in Jerusalem, I guess, you need to seek permission and then you wait for them to give permission. So it's kind of becoming a sort of a norm of experience when it comes to visa and getting your voices heard. So does this inform your literature, or do you try to keep it out of it?
Are you writing a novel about getting a visa?
I know.
Is that the way? No. Okay. Wrong translation.
وانا قريت عملت شويه امتحانات وقدرت اكتشف انه قضيه الدياز هي تاخذ حيز من حياتك. هل هاي المساله علاقه بالدياز تاثر كتاباتك ومشروعاتك الشعريه؟
يعني هذا انا اظن ما بتعلق فيه انا، يعني هي مشكله الفلسطينيين غالبا، والان عم بدخل على قائمه اللي راح يكون عندهم مشاكل بالبيئة، السوريين وعراقيين وليبيين، المنطقة الآن المشكلة عم تتعقد أكثر. أما يعني لست أنا المقصود بشكل شخصي في الموضوع، أنا جزء من القائمة الطويلة. يعني كثير من زملائي الكتاب ما حصلوش على بيئات أو منعوا من الوصول للولايات المتحدة أو كندا. أنا شخصيا مشكلتي اللي قبل كندا كان عندي جولة ب 16 جامعة في الولايات المتحدة لتوقيع الكتاب الأول اللي صدر عن جامعة ييل، وما حصلتش على الفيزا رغم وتم إلغاء الجولة، وقعدنا تقديم طلب الفيزا بعد كانت مفترض بالربيع وحصلنا عليها بالخريف ورتبنا جولة. يعني القصد انه ما كانتش صدمة يعني، لانه احنا معتادين على ذلك، وهذا بيشمل ايضا حتى بعض الدول العربية ايضا، يعني الفلسطينيين يعني صعب تحصل على فيزا للدخول، مشكلة عامة ليست مشكلة شخصية. لا أنا في رأيي نحن نواصل الكتابة ونواصل العيش يعني بفيز كندا أو بدون فيزا عمليا يعني الكتابة لن تتأثر، ربما يعني الرغبة في أنك تصل إلى آفاق وناس آخرين ومهتمين، وربما يعني بتحس ببعض الخسارة، ولكن بالنهاية لا، نحن يعني لن نتوقف عن الكتابة بسبب الفيزا أو قانون الهجرة عند ترامب أو كذا.
So yes, when I was awarded the Griffin Prize, I had visa problems to enter Canada. But this comes in the context of very complex visa procedure for all Arab, not all Arab, many Arab writers as well. Palestinians have always had an issue of mobility within the Arab world and to the world in general because of the Israeli occupation. But now it's not only Palestinians, Syrians and Iraqis are joining as well, this long blacklist, and Yemenis and so on. And it's getting progressively more difficult for artists and art operators to mobilize within the region and outside the region as well. In fact, for me, the main visa drama was prior to Griffin, when my book with Yale came out. I had a tour in the USA. I was supposed to give 16 different readings, and I was denied the visa to enter the USA, although it was an official invitation, and we had to reschedule the tour when, you know, lobby groups and people got intervened and so on. For writing, we write with visas and without visas. We write in spite of Trump's immigration policies. Perhaps there is a bit of loss in the sense of opening up new horizons and being exposed to new audiences. But we do what we know what to do best. We continue to write at any case.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's the best way to end this conversation. Just briefly, thank you very much, Ghassan. Thank you very much, Sam, Fatin, for your wonderful work. Without this, we would be completely lost. And thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you for your fantastic questions and your enthusiasm. See you later.